All right, we're continuing the program here, and our subject over the next few minutes or so is going to be loneliness. And it turns out it's not just a problem for the elderly. 22% of millennials say they have no friends. What's happening here? And is it possible that these people just don't want friends? Joining me on the line is Don Fallik, an associate professor at the University of Delaware in Newark, who's working on a book about loneliness. Don, good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, real pleasure to talk to you. Okay, so what are the stats here? 30% of millennials say they're lonely. 22% say they have, quote unquote, no friends. Does that surprise you?
No, in fact, it's been increasing over time. The study that this group looked at didn't include Generation Z, but there was a big study a year ago of more than 20,000 adults, the U.S. adults, and they found that actually Generation Z, which is between 18 and 22, is by far the loneliest generation. About 48% said that they felt that they were very lonely and that they were in worse health because of it. And the millennials were a little bit lower, but actually the least lonely was the greatest generation. Only about 36% said that they felt lonely. So it's actually flipped from where it was, where the older you are, the less lonely you are. And now the younger people, report the most loneliness of all.
So do we have any idea what's causing this difference, this trend?
Well, it's really interesting. So this book I'm writing, it's called Generation Lonely, 10,000 Followers and No Friends. And I talked to more than 100 people, including a lot of young people, millennials and Generation Z, who describe themselves as very lonely and socially isolated. And the technology is some of it, because it's so easy to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to that party. I'm going to stay home and, binge watch on Netflix or be on your phone. And it's really easy to cancel now because you can just text somebody instead of actually having to call them on the phone and say, yeah, I'm not coming to your party. So that's it makes it easy to opt out and to isolate. But in talking to people, what I found was really interesting was that they expected others to reach out to them. Like I talked to a lot of college students because I'm a college professor. And, a number of them said things like, well, why doesn't anybody text me and invite me out? And I said, well, when was the last time you invited somebody to, just coffee or study together? Like, oh, I'm not going to do that. So it's this very odd one-way expectation. What has changed?
I'm like borderline millennial. Like I'm just on the cusp. Some people say I'm just a little bit too old to qualify as a millennial. But I'll tell you, that's why when I was reading up on this, I said, I wonder how much of this is actual loneliness and how much of this is just, maybe this is the wrong word, but sort of like laziness to do the legwork, and just get, to stop scrolling and actually send someone a message, hey, let's go out.
Exactly. And you actually have to leave the house and go.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest challenge. I mean, when I talk to people about how do you make friends, you have to do things with people on a regular basis doing the same thing. So in college, you're stuck in the same class, 3 times a week, or you're part of an intramural Dungeons and Dragons league, whatever your interest is. But you're all kind of trapped in the same thing, and the same thing at work. So for me, a lot of my friends, I still have friends from college and high school, but many of my closest friends are ones that I made in college because we were trapped together in the dorm. But for this generation, they really have problems connecting on that level. And when you don't know how to make friends, everything's been arranged for you growing up. You're going to go to Girl Scouts and then you come home. It's an organized play date and then you come home. You don't learn to naturally make friends on your own. It has ramifications later on. And now, you talk about the laziness part of it. There's just been so many studies about how people just don't go anymore. And I talked to this loneliness researcher, Juliet Holt-Lundstad, in Utah, and she was saying, it's just that they're waiting for something better. But that's not true. The people I talked to said it's not like they're waiting for a better party. They just want to stay home and watch, Avengers Endgame, on their computer.
Totally, because it's
yeah.
it's so easy. When you said before, you're talking about the book title, 10,000 followers, no friends, right? When I heard that, immediately my mind went more towards women, because when I look at Instagram and my social media, I think when it comes to the sort of influencer category, it's something that I see a lot more women in that. So do you see any trends when it comes to this loneliness between men and women, or is it the same regardless of sex?
It's still such a new area. Like, loneliness the research on it has really just exploded within the past 10 years or so. First, it kind of started with latchkey kids in the 70s, and then it was about depression and anger in video games. And now loneliness has kind of come from that. It's sort of separate from depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. But what they found is that there's a big jump in loneliness in middle-aged men at about age 40.
Wow,
so
okay.
Loneliness peaks when you're about 18, and then again when you're about 40, particularly when you're a white man. Mm-hmm. And there's some questions about, is it, all of a sudden, you've had your kids and you suddenly realize that you have no friends. There's a Boston Globe columnist who wrote about that. Like, suddenly he looked around, he's like, I have nobody to go to the ball game with.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of men responded about that. Women are lonely, are sort of trained from a young age to be more social. So it does tend to be more men who are more lonely, just because, that's the way that we're sort of brought up still, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it seems to me like an indication, to not let certain periods of your life get in the way of staying social, right? So whether it's having children or you start a hectic job, there are periods where I've gone through where I'm not seeing my friends, and in my mind it's valid, but a lot of what you're saying here sort of says to me, like, don't do that. Like, always keep the friends around, even if you've got, the child or the job responsibilities, because you may pay for it later on.
Right, and just think about it. How many times has a friend of yours started dating somebody and then you don't see them anymore? You're just dropped.
Yeah.
Until that breaks up, and then they want to be friends again. It really has to be a concerted effort from both sides, and it doesn't have to be an everyday kind of thing. It could be you meet somebody for a beer, once a month, mm-hmm. or even just, a text like, hey, I'm just checking on you. I know you had that big presentation. How'd that go? It makes the other person know that you care about their life and you're paying attention. And then they have to respond in kind, and that's the trick. The other people also have to respond, and it's becoming harder and harder because they don't really realize that it just can't be about them. So if people who are listening, if you feel lonely or isolated, really think about the last time you called somebody, or I realize nobody uses the phone, but you texted somebody or sent them an email or whatever, and just said, hey, how's your school year going? Or I was just thinking of you.
Reach out, because a lot of people would be glad to join. Dawn, I got to leave it there, unfortunately, but I want to wish you good luck on finishing up this book. It sounds really interesting.
It's been really interesting, and it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Dawn Fallik, an associate professor at the University of Delaware in Newark.